Resentment will destroy you. It's fueling your addiction and stunting your recovery. And we're going to get deep into resentment today. Welcome, everybody. My name is Craig Perra. I am the founder of the Mindful Habit System. And for the past 13 years, my wife and I and our amazing team has been leading men to healthy sexuality and great lives. You're listening to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions, a podcast to help you create and sustain healthy sexuality in a great life. Those two things are inexorably intertwined. They cannot be separated. And to create and sustain, I'll say it one more time because I want you to focus on what you should be focusing on. Too much break a habit out there, not enough make a habit. Okay. We're going to do both today. We're going to talk about the resentful part. I'm going to put it in perspective. If you've never heard of parts work before, I'll explain to you what I mean by that. But before I even, I have a part of me that resents control, that resents being told what to do, that resents authority, that at my lowest points resented my wife, my family, my job, my boss, my wife, and I knew nothing about it. You probably don't either. So take notes and buckle up because we are going to dive deep into the part of you that feels resentment. And we're going to talk about that. So, what you are probably familiar with is your perceived power dynamic in your relationship. Okay. I want you to think of a power dynamic. Okay. And I want you to think about the power dynamic in your relationship before D Day, Discovery Day. Did you feel like you were seen in the relationship? Do you feel like you were able to communicate those needs in a healthy, constructive way to your partner? No, right? You feel, now listen, this is all a projection. So partners listening, this is a projection. These are the stories we're telling ourselves. But tell me if this is you. Let me know in the comment section. You feel like you're the one down in the relationship. Right now, this power dynamic where you're the one down has been magnified since Discovery Day. You're even more in trouble. You feel even more helpless, like she holds all the power, right? We've all heard the expression, happy wife, happy life. My wife, Michelle, hates that expression. Hates that expression for so many different reasons. And I hate it too, because I learned the valuable lesson that if you don't meet your needs proactively, mindfully, intentionally, that means you know what they are, they get met reactively, automatically, habitually, as a trained, conditioned response. Okay. So if you don't know what your needs are, you're unable to communicate them. But what do you do know, right? I want everyone here to think about the part of themselves that rationalizes their behavior, right? What does that part say? Nothing I do is ever good enough. Why bother? How about this? She doesn't do that thing that I want her to do. Or she yells, she screams, she nags. Think of, and I want you to think about that, right? If you're sitting and you're in a quiet place, I want you to imagine yourself at your most resentful and who is present in this scene that you're creating in your mind, right? You can close your eyes and you can imagine yourself at your worst moment of conflict where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, All of your recovery work doesn't matter. Nothing you do is ever good enough. Why bother? Right? This is the part that says, fuck it. Fuck it. Well, we call them fuck it guy, but they're like cousins with resentment. Fuck it guy says, why bother? Nothing I do matters. It's always going to be like this. It's never going to get better. I'm not being treated fairly. There is a double standard. She gets to say all this, and I can't say any of that. That is the justification for the acting out behavior, right? There's a, these aren't some random acts just, like falling out of your pocket like you lose change. Right? You have justified these behaviors to yourself, and that's why parts work is so important. So if you know nothing about parts work, I'm talking Pixar's movies Inside Out, which is based on the science that recognizes the neuroscience that says we have different parts of us that react differently in response to different situations. You don't even need the neuroscience to say, listening to this podcast, yeah, you know what? There is a part of me that wants to do all these bad things. And then there's another part that's like, are you crazy? You're going to lose everything that's dear to you. You're going to lose everything. But there's this other part that you can't control. So I'm represented in cartoons as the angel on one side, the devil on the other side. We have these different parts that awaken in response to external stimuli. And some of the parts that we deal with all the time at the Mindful Habit is the addict part, the liar part, the shame, not good enough part. And let me know in the chat what other parts you can think of. Right? What are the different parts of you that you need to pay attention to? One of the parts that is mandatory, it's mandatory for everybody, but especially for the men in relationships, is we've got to do a deep dive into that resentful part. Right? This part left uncontrolled is justifying your behavior. This part has the rationale and all the reasons why you should do your acting out behavior. Okay? And here's the good news, right? One, the good news is there's something you can do about it. There's a framework that addresses that reality and not only address that reality, gives you a model to deal with it going forward. And that model starts at the center called self-leadership. Right? We have to lead these different parts because if any of you brothers who've been in recovery for a long time know, these parts don't go away. No amount of therapy, counseling, meetings, mindfulness, prayer eliminates your reality that you are going to feel resentful at some point in your life. It's part of the human condition. The resentment part wants. Okay, let's go through it, right? Let's go through it. I want you to imagine that moment when you were most resentful towards your partner. And I want you to put aside all the terrible things that you did. There were many, and maybe you're still doing, so I'm glad you're listening. Right? We're not focusing on that now. We're putting that aside so you can connect with the justifier, the grudge holder, the keeper of wrongs, the why you deserve it part. We'll call that part resentment. And if you're in a safe place to do it, close your eyes and just pretend that part was a character in a movie. What does he look like? What does he look like? What does he feel like? If this part was a character and you had to make your own Pixar movie Inside Out for what's going on inside your head, what would this part look like? I want you to think about that. And let's carry that visualization as we make our way through a framework to better understand this part, give you a perspective of how it's impacting you, where it comes from, what it needs, why it does what it's dubbed, why it does what it does, the job that it's doing, and what to do about it. Okay? Now, I have to say, this stuff comes in layers. If you want to really, really, really lead your parts and break the cycle that's keeping you stuck, despite all the considerable effort that you've spent on yourself, and take a systemic approach, and part of that system is learning how to lead these parts going forward, and to lead them, you have to understand them. Well, then visit mindfulhabithelp.com, call the number, schedule an appointment. Let me know in the comments, right? Hey, I'm interested. But the best thing to do is go to mindfulhabithelp.com and study the different programs. But if you're not in a place to do that, and well, let's keep going, right? So here's what I want you to think about. Let's get practical, okay? If you have a resentful part and you've got a sense of what it looks like if it was a character in a movie, like if you were doing one of those filters on the phone where you press the button and then somebody pops up, you look like yourself in a Monet painting, one of those kinds of filters, right? You've got your filter for your resentful part. When does this part show up? And I want to give you some examples, right? When is this part triggered? What triggers this part? One of my favorite expressions is your triggers awaken your parts. And one of the reasons why I love that expression, because it's clear and makes this parts work really practical. Your triggers awaken your part. When do you feel resentful? When does this part hijack your central nervous system? Is it when your wife brings up your past betrayals and there's a part of you saying she's never going to let it go? Does this part show up when you feel like no matter what you do, you're still the villain, you're still the bad guy? Nothing I do is good enough. We're not talking reality here, guys. We're talking projection. And for any partners listening, I'm going to speak really, really bluntly so I can get in your partner's head to encourage him to tap into that narrative. You feel the resentment. It's there. You feel when his energy shifts, right? You know when he gets defensive. Okay? And well, to do something about it, you have to understand it. So my blunt talk is to help you understand it, right? This part awakens when you don't get the credit for the work that you've been doing, right? Maybe when you hear stories of other guys who are doing well, when you feel trapped in guilt and anger, I'll never be free from this, right? Resentment. What about if you perceive that your wife, there's double standards where she's allowed to talk about certain emotional things, you're not allowed to talk about other things. Your needs don't have validity because of your sins. Because of what you've done, you've lost credibility, you've lost authority, you feel like your needs don't matter. And so think about the exact moments when your resentful part awakens. We got to know when that's happening. Okay. So what triggers the resentful part? And if you're doing this right, you've got a journal next to you. Thousands of studies have documented the mental and physical health benefits of journaling. Absolutely overwhelming. This is too complicated a problem to solve without writing these things down. You cannot do it. I am sorry. Maybe if you've got a photographic memory, even then there's independent value for the act of committing things to paper. There's value in handwriting. There's value in typing. Do what worked for you, but you have to take notes. Okay, let that be a secondary lesson in this video. You have to take notes. So to understand this part, you want to know what triggers this part into existence. Okay. Make a list. Make a list. Now, as you close your eyes and get into character and remember that moment when you were most activated, dysregulated, triggered, pissed off, upset, resentful, she's not treating me fairly, right? What does this part say to you? What does this part say to you? What are the thoughts that you have? I'll tell you, one of the thoughts that I used to have is, look, fucking crisis won't stop. I can't take it anymore. I am so sick of it. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm looking at. Here's where I'm going. I had this, now I understand, a ridiculous reaction, but there was a reaction. What's your reaction? What does this part say to you? She'll never forgive you, so why bother? How about this? I've already paid my price. Why are you still punishing me? How long am I going to be in the punishment phase? How about this? Why do you get to say however you feel, and as soon as I bring it up, I'm being defensive? Right? Nobody knows how goddamn hard we're trying, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. She's never made mistakes. She's never hurt you. She never did anything wrong. Everything's my fault. Think about that. Really sit and take a breath and get into character, right? Write down the curse words. Write down the phrases that you know that repeat themselves over and over and again. And the reason why you have to do this is because eventually that resentment builds, 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 and resentment, like one of those things in football where they run behind the quarterback, hands it off to fuck it guy. And fuck it guy says, why bother? What is the point of even trying? I deserve it. I deserve it because I'm not getting something over here. I am resentful because I'm not getting my needs met over here. This part has very specific triggers and has very specific thoughts. And what we're doing, there's a lot of things that we're doing, but one of the things that we're doing, and I want you to ask yourself, are you doing this? Right? In your therapy, in your counseling, in your program, are you learning to use your awareness of the trigger and the thought to do something else? Because you're not going to get rid of the trigger. You're not going to get rid of the thought, right? There's no future reality where you don't like get a resentment trigger. It just isn't going to happen. That's not the human condition. Maybe if you move to the monastery and dedicate your life 14 hours a day for 20 years, maybe, right, you will experience that perfect peace and tranquility. I know I'll experience it when I'm dead. We gotta learn to manage these parts. So this part gets triggered. This part has thoughts. This part has a physical sensation in the body. And this part causes us to do things that make things significantly worse. What does this part cause us to do? To shut down emotionally when your wife expresses her pain. Here we go again. I thought we were moving forward. We didn't talk about my thing, right? You shut down. Right? This part, because you have this perceived power imbalance where you're the one down, right, gets defensive, argues instead of listening. You can have lots of points that you need to make, but you got to make them now? No, you can't control it. You feel resentful. Right? Us men thrive on significance. And when that outside, when people looking at the outside, so many of my clients are really successful, and there's that massive contrast to how people are seeing them on the inside and how powerless and weak and pathetic that they feel in their relationships. And then they've made this stinking mess and it's even worse. We get defensive. We get angry. We shut down emotionally. We compare. The scorekeeper, the resentful part keeps score. What about this? What about this? What about that? You did this, you did that. Whenever Michelle would blow a gasket, and I would bait her to blow a gasket because I was so manipulative, right? Push button, push button, push button. She'd blow a gasket and scream like a crazy person. I'd be like, uh-huh, you're the crazy one. You're the crazy one. That's gaslighting, manipulative, and abusive. I just want to be clear, telling you how I think about my behavior today and looking back, right? That's what I think. I think it's important for me to call it what it is. And, I want to talk about it. So I gotcha, right? And because I had no understanding of what my needs really were, and had absolutely no conditioning on training and communicating those needs and getting those needs met in an emotionally mature way. I didn't even understand these words existed. I would get resentful and act out. And I justified my acting out by that resentment. The resentment is fuel for acting out. What does the resentful part make you do? Act out. Avoid difficult conversations, hold on to anger, right? Resentment's the grudge keeper. The resentful part keeps score. But here's the thing that is massively important to understand. Virtually all behavior is need-seeking behavior. We are need-seeking organisms. Everything we do is a trained, conditioned response to meet needs in some way, shape, or form. And if needs don't get met proactively, they get met reactively. If you don't learn how to know what your needs are and communicate them in a way that they'll be received and honored and respected, and you've got two people who use this crisis to join arm in arm and bat down the hatches and do the work that's necessary to make the relationship better, because that's the only outcome where I've seen joy and happiness, is the relationship has to be better. Doesn't mean that there aren't challenges, doesn't mean that there's intimacy hurdles to climb. This is essentially in part an intimacy disorder. And so you got to manage the resentful part, right? But let's think about it, right? So all behavior is need-seeking behavior. To break a habit, you have to make the right habit that meets the right needs. What is this part trying to accomplish, right? Why does this resentful part keep score? Well, it wants you to be treated fairly. It wants you to have a say. It wants you to have fun, to experience joy, to escape, to relax, to get away, to do nothing. And as you dig into this part, you must understand exactly what this part is trying to accomplish. You have to understand the needs that this part is meeting so you can meet those needs proactively. Right? And that's the incredible value of the parts work. It not only gives you a container, not only does it give you a container to put all the family of origin stuff, the childhood stuff that you've been talking about, maybe in some cases ad nauseum in therapy. Like this puts the family of origin, the conditioning, the training, one of my favorite words. I love the word training. Right? All of your behaviors that you're trying to break are trained conditioned responses. You actually lack capacity. You can't do it. How do we build capacity? We build capacity by using your awareness of the reaction to drive positive action. Using your awareness of the reaction to drive positive action. Why is that necessary? Because you're not going to get rid of the reaction. You're going to get triggered. And you're going to have thoughts. You're going to feel that way in your body. You're going to feel like you're not being treated fairly. Nobody can push our buttons like our partner and our children and our parents and our boss. Whenever there's a power dynamic, authority, how about some of you guys on authority? And guys, here's another perspective that I think it's important to have. In 13 years helping guys, almost every guy is projecting authority onto his wife. She's the boss. She's the boss. Right? You do not feel like an equal. You may be the boss out in public, professionally, but at home, you feel that power dynamic that we talked about earlier. Now, how was that part trained? This is the family of origin, root cause, childhood container. We put it in the container of the part to know, how did I get so bad at solving problems for myself? How did I get so bad at stuffing these behaviors down and using it to justify actions that is tearing me apart and destroying the lives of people I love, my wife? Because this part was trained. So I want to give you some questions to think about so you can ask yourself, and something that you can work on with your therapist, or like I said, you want to hit this deeply, quickly, and practically, mindfulhabithelp.com. So, a couple questions for you to think about. Right? Growing up, how did your family handle conflict? Did your parents hold grudges, or did they forgive easily? Now remember, train, condition, response. These are patterns. You are repeating patterns. And for any of you guys reluctant to go into the past, or you say to yourself, you know what? I had a great childhood, nothing to see there. No, 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 no. That is the wrong perspective. You can have a great childhood and be trained and conditioned to lie and keep sexual secrets. We'll do the liar another day. That's another fascinating part. How long you been lying about using pleasure to escape discomfort? Oh, like one of your oldest and most impactful habits? You gotta be kidding me. Think how far back that goes. So, did your parents hold grudges? Did they forgive easily? Were you allowed to express anger? But you have to stuff it down? Were you allowed to express emotion? Did you see one parent resent the other? And did you see resentment go unresolved? Were you taught that admitting mistakes meant punishment instead of repair? What happened when you admitted a mistake? Right? Did you learn that people never truly forgive? So how was resentment modeled for you? Did you grow up thinking that trust, once broken, could never be repaired? Did you have to fight to be heard? Did you learn to meet your needs in secret because meeting them outward and openly would subject you to ridicule or shame or anger or judgment, criticism? Were you taught to suppress your feelings? And that's like every guy, right? Stuff it down, conceal, don't feel. And yes, I just quoted Frozen. Did you learn to use resentment as a shield so you wouldn't have to face your own hurt? What, in the overarching question that I want you to ask is, how was resentment trained? And that leads you down a deep, fascinating, wildly impactful journey of understanding how you got to be this way. Right? Why is this your default behavior? Those thoughts that we thought about in the beginning, when you get resentful and you want to fly off the handle and say those things and think those things, they're not magically appearing out of thin air. They are trained, conditioned responses. What wires together, fires together. And this is one of the values of understanding how this part was trained. Right? Your resentful part is, all of you is a combination of your genetics and your environment. And we know now more than ever that line between genetics and environment is not nearly as clear as we thought it once was. In fact, we know that the environment that you're in trigger genes to turn on and off. It's called epigenetics. And it sounds absolutely crazy, but look it up. It's true. So that line between environment and genes is not a solid line, right? They're blend. One impacts the other. They both impact each other. These parts were trained to do a certain job, right? So your resentful part as the scorekeeper, right, was trained to be able to justify you meeting your needs in an unhealthy way. This part doesn't want you to drown in regret, so it keeps score and keeps the focus outward. Right, this part gives you control when you feel blamed or stuck, resentment. Right, this part keeps you guided so you don't have to face the deeper wounds. Remember, the bigger the reaction, the deeper the wound. Bigger the anger, smaller the inner child. Bigger the resentment, the more banged up and battered resentment was trained. Addict was trained, liar was trained, not good enough was trained, sabotage was trained, the internal critic was trained, and resentment was trained. And not only was resentment trained, this part actually helped you, just like all of your parts help you. That help may be completely gone haywire and causing an absolute disaster, but please make no mistake that these parts are trying to meet needs and are trying to help. So let's take a look at the resentful part, right? How has it helped you? It helped you stand up for yourself when you felt attacked, right? It kept you from feeling completely crushed under your mistakes. It gave you a sense of identity when you felt loss and guilt. It taught you. It was a beacon for when there was unfairness, when a boundary was being crossed or a boundary was being violated, whether it's, we're not talking about reasonability of the boundary. We're talking about the reality that this resentful part is a byproduct of your inability to meet your needs proactively. And this part was trained. Right? This part keeps us from getting stuck in self-loathing. This part has a passion for fairness. It fights or flights or freezes or fawns and people pleases for what feels fair, even if it does so in a damaging way. This part is emotional awareness. We got to use it in a positive way going forward. It signals that something is off. It signals that maybe a boundary has been crossed, or maybe I need to assert myself here, or maybe I need to communicate this in a different way. See, because if you're not able to get rid of the part, then you have to learn how to use it. And that's what's so often is that the parts work not only gives you the family of origin, an awareness around the thoughts, the feelings in the body, all that awareness, it also gives you action and it gives you a framework for leading this part. And that's the ultimate goal. You have to change your relationship with this part. So, because behind resentment, right? So the guy, and you do this, right? Spits out all the ugly that's in his heart and in his mind, all the things he wish he would say if he wouldn't get in trouble, all the things he would say if he had one of those Men in Black buttons when boop, rewinded for the past 5 minutes, right? And that's what I want you thinking about. And I want to encourage you to inflame that part to responsible levels, right? If you're going to blow a gasket, stop. Don't be foolish. But if it feels right for you, step into character. Just like you're in a play, you are your resentful part. You are the scorekeeper. You are the adjudicator of fairness. You are the part that makes sure you get what you need to have a little bit of fun, to relax, to escape, to get a reward, to get even. And think about the questions that I asked you. Think about, how was resentment trained. What triggers resentment? What are the thoughts that resentment has? How does resentment feel in my body? And what job is resentment doing? And here's a question that one of my favorite internal family systems question is, what does resentment, you're talking to the part now, hey, resentment, what do you fear would happen if you stop doing this job? Oh my God, Craig, you'd get taken advantage of. People would walk all over you. You'd have no more fun. Your resentful part is doing a job and has fears that if it stops doing its job, bad things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. And understanding that will absolutely change your life. And not just understanding it, but having a framework to do something about it. You can lead these parts going forward. You can transform the role of these parts. So this becomes like radar, an early warning alert system. Wait a minute. I think I need to communicate something right now. Or I feel as if I'm not being treated fairly. Let me reflect on that. Let me not jump immediately to I'm being controlled. Mommy's telling me what to do. Right? This is the opposite of that. Right? This isn't surrendering and laying down and getting walked all over. No, this is emotionally intelligent responses that'll make your life better. And if that's your path, bringing you closer to your partner because you change your relationship with the stories, with the justification. If you got a need that needs to be addressed, you got to man up and address it. Because I'm telling you, here's a very, very simple formula. Needs get met reactively, how you were trained to meet them, mindlessly, habitually, or they get met proactively. So you need to learn how to manage and lead these parts going forward. If you want more information, I'm going to share in the comments section a worksheet that you can print out. You could fill it out yourself. You can take it to your therapist. And if this worksheet inspires you to say, okay, they're doing something special over there, I'm a leader and I know you got to manage these parts and I know there needs to be accountability and I know I need to focus on the things that are going to bring me on the make a habit side, then reach out, mindfulhabithelp.com. Check out the worksheet. I hope you enjoy it. Give me some feedback in the comments. Thank you so much for listening. It feels so good to be back. We just got back from our second annual in-person men's retreat in San Diego, California, in Oceanside, and it was awesome. For you guys listening, man, thanks for an amazing experience, and thanks for trusting me to lead you on what was an epic journey. Thanks for the love and support, everybody. Get the help you need. Life is too short to suck, so make sure you're feeding the right wolf and embracing your power of choice. Craig Perra from Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions, signing off. Make it great. Bye, everybody.